And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Going for Two, presented by Homefield Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I'm joined by my colleague, Bryan Fischer. It's another garbage day in Chicago. I think the college sports gods knew that I'm like, hey, I'm finally taking some time off next week. If we could all just be cool for a minute, because they have stubbornly refused to be cool. After we specifically asked them to. It's extremely rude.
It's funny because we were talking offline about, your power. You're going off on vacation. Usually that is like exactly when news is going to break. Is you say, I'm going to take some time off. Immediately you understand that news is going to break. But I do have to give you credit. At least you thought you could control the powers that be to kind of let the news wait. But
I tried. So what we're talking about here is an extremely extra points story. I want to make sure that I'm giving credit to the right news outlet. The American Press of Lake Charles, Louisiana, reported late on Thursday that Lamar will be leaving the WAC after one season to rejoin the Southland Conference. And I want to peel back the curtain here a little bit. And this is not me trying to claim credit for this because I got beat, but I do want to provide as much context to this decision as possible, especially as it ties into something that could potentially be much bigger than I'm going to drop on all of your lap and then immediately go on vacation. So I got a call around 9:30 this morning from a source of mine that's affiliated with a Southland institution that said, hey, have you heard anything about this? And what I had been hearing for about 2 months was Lamar could be gettable. Lamar was going through an athletic director transition. They recently had a new president. They were very unsuccessful in the WAC, in football and in basketball and in volleyball and some of these other sports. And the WAC that they agreed to join is different from the WAC that exists now because they signed up before Sam Houston and New Mexico State left for Conference USA and before UT Arlington joined the league, and a lot of things looked different. And my source said, it's like, hey, I think this is happening today or very soon. I'm like, wow, that's a little surprising. Let me ask around and see if I can confirm it. And I called some athletic directors in the Southland, and they were like, it's funny, I heard the same rumor, but wouldn't tell me one way or another. So I called some ADs in the WAC, and I talked to two different people, and they both said this would be news to us. We know what they're talking. We know that there is some dissatisfaction among some of the Lamar booster community, but everyone here is new. We figured that everyone would have a little bit more time before they made a final decision, and we hope we have a chance to talk with them some more. So on that front, I would say this seems pretty surprising. And the rationale for this decision is a little bit different depending on who you're talking to. So let me try to make my best educated read of all the different information that I've been hearing, right? Part of this is about money. Lamar, not a very big budget athletic department, has not been particularly successful, but also has some of their boosters and some people in this world would like them to be an FBS institution, would like them to be much more successful in football than they have been. So right away, you have a dangerous sign. Your resources do not align with expectations. And this is a league where you're going to have to go to Los Angeles. You're going to have to go to Seattle occasionally. Travel, the situation is not as bad as maybe the internet makes it seem to be because you're playing a lot of Texas schools too. But it's true. There are a lot of schools in the Southland that are geographically closer to Beaumont. And as I understand it, within the coaches, within the athletic department, and within the outside, we're saying, what are we doing going to Los Angeles, going to Arizona, and going to these places farther away, when we could go someplace closer, and also kind of reading between the lines, where we're less likely to get thrown into a garbage can in basketball, or we have a pathway to be a little bit more successful in the short term. And so pull the plug. And I don't know about the financials about this yet. I imagine the WAC's going to be pretty pissed. But the Southland has previously demonstrated they're willing to be flexible about things like contracts and hosting and stuff to get people to come back. There's one thing I can tell you, and then we can kind of talk about how this fits in potentially to something bigger. I think it is easy to immediately speculate, oh my gosh, are all the Texas schools going to come back? what I could tell you, based on what I heard today from people who are intimately familiar with those conversations, is the answer is, as of right now, what day is today? April 7th. So on April 8th, when you're listening to this, that's not true. I have been told in pretty explicit terms that UTRGV does not wants to stay. They want to stay in the WAC, and that Stephen F. Austin wants to stay in the WAC, and that Abilene Christian, all things considered, would prefer to stay in the WAC too. And a major part of this, even though big footprint, different league, lots of travel, is alignment in the rest of the footprint. And the WAC setup right now is not just centered around Texas; it's also centered around Utah and around Southern California. And what we know about schools in those states is that they're growing by a lot. The enrollment at Utah Valley is huge. It's the biggest school in the state. There's a lot of money coming into Cal Baptist. There's a lot of money coming into some of these Texas places. There's a lot of money coming into Utah Tech. And when we look at state schools in Louisiana, that hasn't really been the case. They're struggling with funding. They are struggling with state appropriations. They're facing a lot of competition for students, not just from places in Texas, but from Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and elsewhere throughout the state. So you have some of these Texas schools that are like, I don't care about geography for football travel. This is an institutional alignment decision. I want to be looking towards places that are growing. I can understand how a year into it with different data sets, a different school might reach a different conclusion. But I would not read, based on the knowledge I have right now, more into this than actually exists. I think that's what I have on this move right now. Definitely sucks for the WAC, which was this kind of cool feel-good story about, emerging from the ashes of this discarded league and to have this new ambitious future. And because of circumstances that had nothing to do with them, there's a possibility they won't ever be able to realize it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating in respect to everything kind of going on, not just about this move, but kind of around this move. You have two new commissioners involved in this. The WAC just had their commissioner, take over in 2022. Chris Grant, at the Southland, took over Tuesday, I believe it was. So officially from Burnett. So it's like you have new faces, on the conference side. You have new faces on the school side. Lamar, they just had their athletic director. You resigned not too long ago. They've been going through their AD search, and it's been a pretty complicated one from what I've understood. So it's like you got a lot of kind of plates up in the air. You got a lot of names and changing faces, and yet this conference move is affiliation move is going to happen. And I think that to me is kind of where the intrigue lies. And I think it can rightfully point the fingers right at the president in terms of making this decision, making this institutional alignment fit a little bit better for Lamar. And I'm just intrigued too, because it wasn't too long ago that we were talking about the WAC, way back when, potentially being another league that does make that transition as a whole from FCS up to the FBS. I think we're obviously seeing a lot of D2 schools consider the jump into Division I. I think there's more than a few that might be jumping from FCS to FBS. So it's like there's a whole lot of moving parts in this one, and the Texas and as you mentioned, kind of the geographic footprint of both of these leagues, it does overlap a little bit, and how everybody can kind of come to an understanding in terms of where they want to be, who they want to be around, and really that institutional alignment at the conference level is also very important, I think, for a lot of these FCS leagues in particular. And I think it's going to kind of pretend that we understand that this could be a very active summer in terms of moves going forward.
I think it might have even been literally the last episode. I think the last time I wrote about the Northeast, I'm like, hey, I think things are settling down a little bit. Like, right, whatever the NEC and the MAC finally figure out what they're doing, or the America East decides that they're taking Quinnipiac or Fairfield, and that settles down. Like, okay, we can close the book on this era. I don't think that's automatically true now. And I'll tell you why, about something that I have now heard from officials in like 3 different conferences. And this is something that I'm sure I'm going to see on the message boards later. And so my readers are going to flag it. With these changes, we have a lot of FCS schools that are very close to the auto bid line, either above or over. And one way that we saw some of the schools get around this in the Ohio Valley and the Big South was to merge. And I can tell you that the ASUN has tried this and they've talked to other leagues about it. I think the Southland has had preliminary conversations about it. I think they did at least once with the Ohio Valley about merging just for football and maintaining other things. The other kind of elephant in the room here is, and I've mentioned this a couple of times in Extra Points, I don't think it's really gotten a lot of traction elsewhere in the college sports media, but this has become more clear to me here too. I have reason to believe that the Sun Belt is kicking the tires on other FCS programs to potentially expand, not just to improve the football product, but primarily to improve their product in other sports, especially men's basketball, but not exclusively in other places. You have Conference USA that's sitting at 9. And depending on how things go with the transformation committee, or depending on how things go, could invite other entities there as well. The idea of the FCS to FBS call-up, particularly with the July 1 deadline kind of looming, and folks not being entirely sure about what it would look like in the future, there is pressure to potentially have other people jump. I don't mind. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here. Like on the Conference USA front, biggest name that I've been hearing in those conversations has been Eastern Kentucky, the school that has made it very clear they would like to be in the FBS for several years. And the school that I've heard the most about this on the Sun Belt is Missouri State. Not the only school, but the one that I've heard the most conversations about. I say all of this to say, if you are an FCS league that is sitting at 5, 6, 7, or 4, and now you might lose other teams to FBS, there is an increasing realization among some of these leagues that there's just no way to make the math work, that in order to have a sustainable, reliable FCS auto bid league. So one thing that I have heard beginning conversations about, I want to stress this before this ends up in like a 22-page thread on Reddit or something. These are early stages in conversations. I do not know exactly where they are going to end up. I am not privy to every specific detail. I know enough that I feel comfortable saying this, and you guys can yell and debate the specifics on your own. I'm going to be gone next week. I'm building furniture. Don't call me. What I've been hearing is that these 3 leagues have had discussions about what is a vehicle that we could potentially do to allow schools from our leagues to jump to FBS, either as their own league or potentially as some kind of alliance or confederation as independents, negotiate their own bowl bids, figure out how they're going to end up playing in conference, the college football playoff revenue. Maybe they make a run at some Conference USA members. Maybe they focus on just the FCS alignment within this league. But that way, if you're Tarleton, if you're McNeese, if you're Eastern Kentucky, if you're, I don't know, Kennesaw State or Central Arkansas, or some of these other places that have at least expressed interest at one time in going FBS, and in the case of Tarleton, a lot of interest in going FBS, that you can support those and then move membership around or create alliances so you can maintain your automatic bids and tournaments for other sports, rather than trying to play musical chairs and keep FCS football auto bids for leagues where that may not be tenable. I don't believe any of these 3 conferences are going to be able to secure enough Division II call-ups to reach a sustainable 7, 8, 9 teams. I know they're trying. I know everyone's called everybody in the Lone Star Conference. I know they've called places out west. I know all of the big schools in the Southeast have been called. That's my best intelligence right now. After hearing that, you might know some of these rules better than I do, Bryan. Can you think of any way where that might be possible? Like, I'm not saying that, we're all kind of making up the rules here as we go along, but I mean, what, do you put everybody, do you like create Southland FBS and put everybody in there? I don't know the right legal or financial vehicle to pull something like this off,
Well, I mean, there are certain requirements in terms of sports sponsorships that a lot of these conferences have to meet, and so there's that aspect, but that might be changing. I think that's the great unknown too, is that a lot of these commissioners, like, they don't even know essentially what will be required of their conferences going forward. Obviously, you think in terms of the Power Five and the kind of high level FBS conferences, they're going to be okay. But when you're talking about so many changing, membership changes, like you kind of don't know, are we going to have to be required to sponsor X number of sports? Will it be a case to where we kind of have a satellite conference, if you will? I think we've spoken a little bit about, like the MPSF in terms of housing some of those sports, maybe something like that, a similar arrangement that they kind of have as the underling, if you will, to the Pac-12, to a lot of those Pac-12 programs that really don't have a school, a home necessarily in terms of their conference affiliation. And so there's something like that that could be out there. There are single sport conferences that are technically possible. I don't think we've ever seen it attempted in football, just because that's such a key sport for a lot of these leagues. But maybe there's a path that way. And I think it's going to be fascinating because you know what, a lot of this is up in the air. The transformation committee is meeting weekly. They farmed out some of these tasks in terms of doing all the Division I bylaws and all that stuff. And so it's kind of up in the air in terms of ultimately where things are going. But you mentioned the Sun Belt earlier. I mean, look, they kind of made waves earlier this week just in terms of the other football, in terms of soccer. They added men's soccer, poached a couple of really big time programs like West Virginia, Marshall, who just won the championship not too long ago.
Yeah, it's a good ass soccer league.
A great league. And they basically torpedoed Conference USA, which is, men's soccer is one of their sports that they sponsor. Now they only have really 2 members left that end up sponsoring men's soccer. So that's taking away an entire sport sponsorship unless Conference USA can find affiliate members, unless they can find other schools that want to start men's soccer programs, which, it's a challenging environment to do that right now, not just in terms of Title IX and the implications that you have to consider with that, but also just in terms of the pressures that are being put on from, in Conference USA's footprint from some of the MLS teams, the USL teams, some of the academies. The soccer environment right now is really fascinating in the kind of between the 16 to 18-year-old range across the country. And, schools are kind of being caught in the middle of that. And so I think it's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. And I think the unique thing, we've seen these leagues kind of temporarily kind of band together to get those AQ bids. We don't know what the future of the AQ bids are. You mentioned in basketball. I mean, look, we've talked about revenue changes in terms of the NCAA units being paid out. I think it might be a case to where they're really trying to look hard to make sure that they not only are getting those AQ bids, but basically that your AQ bid not to the tournament is really guaranteed to where you can actually get into the tournament. You're not being sent automatically to the first 4. I think that's some consideration too for some of these leagues, is they don't want to get stuck into that constant cycle where they're going to the first 4, they're only getting 1 bid. There's just a lot going on, and I think it's made for a little bit of chaos, if you will, just because there's so many moving parts.
It has been a real challenge to try and wrap my arms around it. On soccer, you're right, and we haven't even had a chance to talk about this, but we're looking at a world where soccer might be like a 2-semester sport. Like you might have some fall stuff, you might have some stuff in the spring. I don't know if the 2 Conference USA refugees end up in the MAC, or if they end up in some other affiliate league. I'd be surprised if Conference USA can recruit enough to kind of backfill at that point. But it does speak to what is, as I understand it, a broadening of the Sun Belt's ambitions. So before the last round of expansion, this is not a pejorative, I think it's just the reality. The Sun Belt perceived itself as a football conference. Football was the most important thing. Second most important thing was football. Third most important thing was football. And they made these expansion decisions primarily about football. I think you can make a pretty compelling case right now. We'll see what happens in the next year or two, that they're the best G5 football league. Maybe it's the American, depending on the year, Mountain West. But the idea that there was a massive gap between the American and the Sun Belt, I think in the short term is not there right now. We'll see what happens in a couple of years. But I think as a consequence of that, maybe they weren't necessarily expecting, but now you've ended up with a really good men's soccer league. You have some really good baseball programs. You have at the top end some very strong softball programs. And so now the thought is, what if instead of just being our goal being the best non-power football conference, which is maybe you don't agree with they're there now, maybe not, but it's not an impossible goal. I don't think it's impossible for them to catch South Florida and Memphis, depending on kind of what happens in that league. But why not be that in everything? Why can't we be a multi-bid league in everything that we're doing? And that is an attainable goal depending on how you do membership or what you invest in for baseball or softball or some other things. Georgia State got a 16 seed in the men's tournament. I can tell you, there is a mandate within the Sun Belt, whether you fix that through scheduling or expansion or something else, to never be a 16 seed again. And whatever they decide to do on that front has major implications for the ASUN and for the Southland or potentially other leagues, because that's likely where you're looking to pull from, even potentially the Missouri Valley. Although at least for the Missouri Valley, through my reporting and through kind of talking around a little bit, we know that there's a pipeline of several potential basketball candidates to backfill there. And if you lose a Missouri Valley football school, there's options to go and grab that replacement. There's 3 or 4 other schools that would love to be in the Missouri Valley for basketball and have applied before. That's not the case right now for the Southland. Like, you're hoping New Orleans starts a football team. It's not really the case for the ASUN, because if West Florida was ready to join, West Florida would be in that league. Like, they're operating on different timelines. So that's what I'm hearing right now, friends. Chances are, there's a good chance there'll be some additional clarity next week. If something breaks during next week, we'll retweet it. We'll share it on D1 Ticker, which you should read. It is going to literally kill me to not want to immediately try to call and blog about it. But if I do, my children will not forgive me. So hopefully nothing explodes until I can get back. But I realized by virtue of saying that, the Sun Belt's going to announce 4 new schools next Thursday, because...
Well, I mean, we didn't even get into, you mentioned the MVC there. I mean, like, there was some drama surrounding that conference.
I forgot to talk about that. Yeah. Here's what I know about that. There is a reason that Murray State wasn't announced as soon as Murray State basketball joined everything. And I think at the beginning of that announcement, when all their other sports joined the Missouri Valley, that I think there was some fan expectation that football would join immediately. Sometimes people forget this. They're 2 different leagues. Yeah. They have 2 different commissioners. They have 2 different membership. The only thing they have in common is some of the same schools and the words Missouri Valley. They have different missions and everything. In the Missouri Valley, don't listen to this if you work for the Big Sky. The Missouri Valley is the best FCS football conference. You can argue the Big Sky if you want, but like, this is how they perceive themselves. And Murray State, we have to be honest here. Right now, they suck. They're not a good FCS football team. They are a Sagarin sub 200 kind of program, which means that when they play North Dakota State or South Dakota State, barring significant improvement, they are going to get put in the trash. And you found that there were some schools in that league that didn't want to deal with them, and that maybe you deal with them if Western Illinois left, which was something that looked like it really could happen for months. Now I don't think that it will. And there's some weird institutional politics behind that. And you had an unusual case of North Dakota State's president flat out saying, I voted against this. I have a lot of concerns. Now, Bryan, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that particular president is leaving. So that may be the case of, I don't give a shit anymore because I'm gone in 6 months. I can tell you what I really think. And also a way of giving maybe his AD and his administration some cover from fans who really don't like this decision. And to give cover for other schools that did. But I'm not saying that the Missouri Valley is going to break up and that the Summit League is going to start football. I know that that's on message boards. I've seen it on Reddit. I have not heard that from anybody that would know, and I've asked them. I don't know if this is possible, but like, that's not a thing that I'm aware of is in the works right now. But I do know that when conference realignment changes happen and you immediately have people saying, I'm not in favor of this, and there's not a veritable truckload of money to paper over those differences like there is with Texas joining the SEC above Texas A&M's complaints, you have the potential for instability. So something else to monitor there over the next year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the VC and MVFC, I guess you would say in terms of their initials. But look, that is a league that obviously you have North Dakota State, and they're kind of off to their own. But like all the others in the league, especially the other Dakota schools, like they've raised their game significantly over the last couple of years when it comes to football. And I think there is some concern. Is this a step back? I think that's why those words were very pointed, certainly. And I think there was, the fact of the matter is that they kind of went running to some of the local media outlets to kind of get their viewpoint out there. I think was certainly notable. It's something that I think the Missouri Valley Commissioner will have to address, I'm sure, with some of those presidents. But hey, when you're going out the door, probably pretty much anything goes. And so you might as well go ahead and put that out there, especially if it'll earn you some brownie points as you're exiting with your fan base and some of your boosters and alumni in particular. But I think it just kind of speaks to the fact that there is just a heck of a lot going on at the FCS level in terms of moving parts. And I think that to me is certainly a source of frustration for some that just kind of want that stable home, but there's really not one out there
like that, me. I love writing about this stuff. I want everyone to chill for like a month. I want to beat Horizon Zero Dawn. I want to make a jewelry box for my daughter. I want to be able to talk about other stuff for a little bit. And I don't know if it's my own neurosis or what, but when I get these texts, I feel like I'm obligated to go track them down as quickly as I can. And I'm not going to get that blessing because there's a lot happening.
I mean, we're not even done necessarily. You got the Big 12 commissioner search. Maybe that's a league again that we've always heard that they might be expanding as another round of that once the 4 new members come in and Texas and Oklahoma ultimately exit. Obviously, a lot of connection with Boise State and Memphis. Just in terms of the initial round, we might not be done at the FBS level. So realignment that does not slow down.
Not if the Sun Belt has its way, right? Then those will be also FBS moves. I want to very quickly talk about something that is popular with the North Dakota State fan community, much more popular than Murray State football, Homefield Apparel. Because does Homefield Apparel have North Dakota State? You're goddamn right they do. They have a wonderful Snorting Bison t-shirt. My wife has bought it. Many people have asked her if she went to North Dakota State. She's like, nope, my husband is just a big deal on nerd internet. And now I have this shirt, which is great because it's a lovely shirt. You got a bunch of other great Midwestern institutions, but most of them in the Big Ten. You also have some in the Horizon League, some there in the Missouri Valley. Any kind of licensed shirt that you would want with a lot of the vintage, unique logos that are from yesteryear, you can get it from our friends at Homefield Apparel. They got T-shirts, they got hoodies, they got crew necks. You can buy pants. I think you can still buy the pants with the St. Peter's peacock on them. I don't think they sell the Doggers anymore. They even sell a couple of stickers, and they sell Extra Point shirts. We don't use this logo all of the time now. I really like the pennant Extra Points logo. It fits in with the whole kind of my whole deal behind me with all the other pennants. But the Bagman does have a soft spot in my heart. I can understand why maybe not every single Extra Points partner thinks that that's brand safe or caters to the message that we want, whatever. I get it. But if you like the Bagman logo, Homefield Apparel sells T-shirts with it. And I have stickers with the Bagman. And you can support our sponsor and support our show and our newsletter and our company by buying some of that stuff. And you can do it with promo code Extra Points and save 15% off of your first order from Homefield Apparel. Bryan, are you rocking Homefield today? You are. Look at that.
Gotta go with the tops.
You're going with the tops. I'm wearing a real shirt today because I felt like I was running late and I had to put on something with a collar. I was speaking to a class beforehand. I am wearing the Boise State Broncos shirt under this because I am incapable of dressing like a true professional, despite being a professional.
Well, I just had an interview and I had to go put my son down afterwards, and so I had to change shirts. I'm gonna go with the tops here and WKU and rocking one of the unique logos I think in the catalog. And look, still a lot more to come from Homefield in terms of their designs, in terms of some of their stuff. It's we're easing into summer and spring, and they still got a lot out there on their plate. But be sure to use that promo code Extra Points because there is a lot that you can peruse through the catalog to find.
And also just one quick note: if you happen to work for a university or an athletic conference or some third-party institution that is somehow affiliated with college sports, and you're thinking, boy, North Dakota State has their stuff on there. Colorado School of Mines has their stuff on there. Chicago State has stuff on there. Why isn't my stuff on there? Brother, shoot me an email, matt@extrapointsnb.com. I'll hook you up with Homefield, and we'll see if they can get your stuff on there too. Bryan, I got a couple of minutes before I need to go dad and then edit the legion of things I have to edit before I can actually take this time off. But we do want to quickly talk about this Big 12 not coaching search, athletic director search. There's been a lot of names bandied about. I know you've been making calls about it. What have you heard about this opening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very early in the process, right? I think the presidents themselves, have not really gotten a chance to get together and discuss things. I would imagine, right now they're going to hire a search firm. I think that's kind of step one. Kind of conduct the background searches that they need to on a lot of the candidates. Kind of throw that big net out there. Kind of get some feedback, certainly from not just the current 8 presidents, but also the 4 incoming schools. Get their thoughts in terms of who they want to work with. What type of leader that they're looking for. I think that is the key over probably the next month. Really, everybody in the Big 12 is going to be meeting in Phoenix, for kind of their spring meetings. That's a pretty popular meeting spot. Pac-12 will be out there, Big 10 will be out there, and I think that is kind of when the next phase for the Big 12 is really going to kick into gear, and you start to get, beyond just kind of the general names that are getting thrown out, like Oliver Luck and all those. Like, I think there's actually going to be the really drilling down into, here's 5 or 6 candidates going into those spring meetings. And look, I think they are certainly aiming towards, an early July type of hire. I think there's no reason to suggest that they won't make that date. And I think there is a lot of optimism that they want to roll out a new commissioner for Big 12 Media Days there in mid-July. I think that's kind of the target date for the transition to happen. And if Bob Bowlesby has to stay on a little longer, I think it's not that big of a deal. But ultimately, he doesn't want to go back and go out and go fish and go golf and enjoy his time with his grandkids as well. So there's a lot going on. I think there's a lot of names, but it's still very early in the process.
I think the smart way to consume news about this search is to focus less on the names. You and I could sit here, we can ref on 10 names that get brought up for most of these searches. A lot of those candidates are the same that you would have for the Pac-12 or the SEC, and that's fine. They're highly talented executives. There's going to be a couple of names that are going to pop up that are not on Nadia's list now, just because I think they're going to do some vetting for people outside of the industry, whether they're tied more on broadcasting, whether they're tied more with tech. I wouldn't be shocked if one of the 5 or 6 finalists ends up being somebody who is primarily from the streaming world or even potentially live events world to kind of just take their temperature. It's someone similar to a Kliavkov. But I don't know. I don't know who they're going to hire yet. Like the more interesting thing, I think, for everything here, and we'll get some more information after Phoenix, is more about skill sets. I would also agree, and this would echo with what I have been hearing, that somebody in the seat by Big 12 Media Days is a reasonable goal. And the two, Bowlesby and the new person, will probably work together for a little bit, which is not uncommon for lots of big, gigantic leadership changes, and what we've been seeing on some level with a lot of commissioner changes. I am happy that Bob gets to play with his grandkids. I imagine he's not going to throw his phone in the fireplace forever as they kind of transition this. I would say, I also, like, I don't get the sense that this was like a red wedding, your coup kind of situation. Like, I think a lot of people in college sports knew that there isn't a delicate on-ramp because we're lurching from one catastrophe to another, but that something like this was likely within the kind of time frame we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob has kind of mentioned it himself in interviews and whatnot, and chatting with folks. It just kind of was a bit of a natural jumping off point for him, given where the league is going. You have membership changes, you have a TV deal coming in. Ideally, the new commissioner not only gets to know everybody, but it kind of understands the lay of the land before jumping into those negotiations with Fox and ESPN. And I think there's the other kind of thing that he knows more than anybody about college football playoff expansion. That there is still that process to go, and I think that was a concern certainly when the 12-team plan that he initially worked on and put 2 years of blood, sweat, and airport meetings and secret conference rooms into. A lot of it got derailed by new commissioners coming in. So I think there's kind of a focus from the Big 12 to say, hey, we can get our new guy in that room while those conversations are going on about the future of the postseason in football, especially the postseason in terms of revenue distributions and where the Big 12 falls on that. I think that's going to be key for the new guy. And then obviously a lot of change at the NCAA level that the Big 12 is going to have to navigate. Still have that A5 designation when it comes to kind of some special status and passing bylaws and all that stuff. Is that going to change? It doesn't seem like it, but you never know with the leadership transition. So having somebody that people know is going to be at the table for a while is always going to be important for them. So I think it's just a fascinating commissioner search and really will tell us more than anything the future of what the Big 12 really wants to be. And I think that is the key that you're going to look for, not just the names involved in this one, but really what the Big 12 wants to be.
That's a great point about how this impacts the college football playoff. We did have there's a lot of new commissioners in there. And, some of those people, Jim Phillips has been has been working in college sports since it emerged from the primordial ooze, way back eons ago, right? But it's different when you're in the big chair, and especially when a lot of the kind of battle lines are SEC versus everybody else, and one person has a lot more experience than everyone. I can see why some stakeholders in the Big 12 would say, well, that's why we need a Jim Phillips. That's why we need somebody who could step into that room and immediately start pushing people around from day one. Maybe. I don't know if there are that many Jim Phillips out there. That could be it, or something else.
If this had happened, maybe 18 months ago, let's say Bob Bowlesby announces, hey, I want to retire, whatever, 18 months ago, or just even a year ago at this time, I would have put some money on Joe Castiglione, the Oklahoma AD.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore, certainly. But talk about an AD that would have been respected around the league. Everybody would have had no issues with Joe moving from Norman to Dallas, and taking over the big chair. He's been a mentor to a lot of the ADs around the league. That would have made so much sense, but not now. That's for sure. You that axis of Texas and Oklahoma influence is not there anymore. That to me is another fascinating kind of subplot to everything going on right now in the Big 12 is which school presidents are going to step up and fill that vacuum. Which of the school ADs are going to make sure that their voices are heard? Is it going to be a Mac Rhodes? Is it going to be a Kirby Hocutt? Are they going to be the ones having influence over this process? Because Texas and Oklahoma, they are headed out of town. Their bags are packed. They're kind of locked outside the door there, and they will probably not have that much influence on the future of the Big 12 anymore. And that has not been the case since the league was founded.
Yeah, I don't know how much influence they're going to have. Do they get to vote on the new person?
I've been asking around, and so on Future Matters, it doesn't seem like it would be, but they have not given notice yet officially in terms of actually when they're exiting the league. Obviously, they've been invited to the SEC, so that is happening. That is why they're not included. But you never know. Texas and Oklahoma, they still technically have a seat at the table. So we'll see.
Yeah, this is a good place to close. This sport is so stupid. I say that with love. One way or another, it looks like both of us are going to be writing and talking and doing videos about schools in Texas leaving or not leaving their respective conferences, whether they're in places that will pay them $110 million or $110,000. You will be able to listen to some of these interviews on Collegiate Sports Connect with Bryan and I and our team, talking to different leaders within college athletics about realignment, about media rights deals, about NIL, about facilities, all of that stuff. They're all free. You sign up on Collegiate Sports Connect. My understanding is that we're going to try to do this podcast without me. I will write the episodes, share those on Extra Points. I'm not, unfortunately, leaving the state. I'm mostly just tooling around with my kids the next couple of days because they're off of school. But the podcast will continue, and of course, you can continue to follow along at extrapointsmb.com. If I can finish this editing in time, we are going to have a post on Extra Points next week from a current college athlete as part of the next generation of NIL deals. We've got some freelance stories coming from Andy Witry. I don't know. Maybe if the Sun Belt expands in the next 6 days, I'll write something. We'll find out. Let's not find out, but we might find out. You can also, of course, follow me on Twitter at MattBrownEP. Did I forget to plug anything? I think I got everything right.
No, I think that's pretty much it. And if you want the latest on every single realignment rumor out there, certainly sign up for D1 Ticker, because that will be in either our morning edition or our evening standard edition. And that is what a lot of other ADs and a lot of conference commissioners are reading as well, as they kind of try to make sense of this changing college landscape.
Friends, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all of your support over the last couple of weeks. Thanks for telling your friends about this podcast, which you can find on Spotify and YouTube and Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And if your microwave oven lets you download podcasts, there's probably a way to figure out how to play this on there too while you're waiting for your popcorn. Bryan will catch up with you next week. I will see you hopefully with all 10 of my fingers after some well-needed garage time. Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all soon.